Paul, thanks for the interview and giving us a further explanation about the recent actions. You've just resigned this week as Seaton councillor. Why was it that you couldn't wait till May?
Well, primarily because, first of all, I'm not up for election this May. I'm up for election in May 2019, so it was another 18 months to be the councillor. And primarily the organisation which I work for is extremely busy. We're launching new projects in this month and in next month. We have geographical growth planned for the rest of the year. And I've always said that if I was going to be the Seaton councillor, I would do it properly, and I would do it where I could give 100% to the residents of Seaton. And I just know that in the forthcoming weeks, my time's going to be extremely scarce, and it'll be a case of letting residents down and not being able to do that. And I don't want to become one of those councillors who ignores residents, never responds to them. You know, I've committed to the last 7.5 years to being a responsive councillor and engaging with the community. And if I don't feel I can do that anymore, it's not right for me to continue as a councillor, which is the primary reason why I stepped down.
Obviously, primarily Seaton, but also the town. I mean, these residents have fought everything. They've fought landfills, higher landfills, ghost ships, massive wind turbines. Everything seems to sort of end on Seaton. What is the next disaster for Seaton, as you see it?
I'm not too sure I'm qualified enough to talk about the next disaster for Seaton. One of the big worries I have for Seaton, though, and we've been trying to challenge this for the last 6-7 months, is the way that Seaton is being neglected by the current administration, and that almost it's being penalised for the way that it works. And an example of that, Pam, is things like the parking charges that have been put on for Seaton on the seafront, and that concerns me. You know, the first weekend that they will put those parking meters were active, Seaton was almost like a ghost town, and it concerns me that if it continues like that for the long term, businesses across Seaton will inextricably be forced to close, and then we'll have a situation where there'll be a decline in Seaton, and nobody wants that. You know, I don't think the council actually wants that. I just don't think they've thought.
Well, I mean, with the whole ambience and of Seaton, it was such a nice, relaxed place to go, and that ambience has just been shattered. Some people say that it's because Seaton historically never elect a Labour councillor. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure if I completely agree with that, because Seaton has in the past voted for it and has had Labour councillors. If we go back sort of through the annals of time, Seaton did historically for a long time have 3 Conservative councillors, and as we know fine well, Labour and Conservative in Hartlepool are very much the same thing. However, several years ago, Kath Hill and Mike Turner, who were both Labour councillors at the time, they both took away a Conservative seat, and Labour had an occupation in Seaton for some time. Kath and Mike, though, became independents because they were very jaded with the way that the Labour groups in Hartlepool operate, and managed to sustain that independence in Seaton for a long time. And the electorate in Seaton kept their trust in them for a long time because it knew it worked for them. I came along in 2010 and took the last seat from Conservatives. And I think there is things that maybe Seaton residents have been penalised for, but that's having 3 strong councillors who've constantly been standing up for this town. And there's certain things that we've stood up for that are not the right things for the town, such as the scrapping of the local plan, the scandal and the fraud that was involved in Manor Residents Association, the self-centeredness of some councillors giving themselves a 31% pay rise and then going out and buying themselves brand new BMWs. All of those things we've stood up for across Seaton and being able to represent the town accordingly. Mm.
Paul, obviously your resignation letter has just been released online. Were you surprised about that?
I was surprised about that. I mean, that was a correspondence that wasn't supposed to be released, but it's out there in the public domain, and I absolutely stand by every sentiment and every iota that was concerned in that letter.
I have to read one little excerpt for the viewers here, and where you state, I also must go on record as saying that the continuous incompetence of the town's political leadership has been a small factor in my decision. Is it possible to be gobsmacked at, but at the same time thoroughly unsurprised by the continued failings of our politicians? That's really damning.
Again, I stand by. And the things that I talk about...
You do actually go on with, you know, and you mention, you know, Chris Akers-Belchers and Councillor Cranny and Barclay and obviously Councillor James. Do you stand by all this?
Absolutely.
Failings of the cafe, vast lost income of the vineyards, 106 monies. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You know, we'll obviously post it at the end of this for the viewers, but why is it, do you think, with all these failings, people in the town still vote Labour? Because
I think there's still a message to be done to let people know right across the town that that these failings actually exist. I think there's been a huge change in public opinion towards the administration in recent years, because independently minded councillors have raised those issues. You know, the full terrible scandal of several years ago of our civic mayor lying to his employer and saying that he was at a funeral using a family bereavement as an excuse to take a sickie off work, when actually he was in Portsmouth, swanning it around and being the big man, is an absolute disgrace. But those stories wouldn't have got out if it wasn't for independently minded people and social media being able to circulate them. Now, since that point, and since the aforementioned Manor Residents scandal, there has been a change in this town, but it's still a big change to go through, because the vast majority of voting public in the town are not aware of some of these stories yet. If you look at the demographics of voters, it is an older community that vote, and those people that don't have a huge presence on social media. But this uprising that's being witnessed as part of the Momentum movement and the Corbynites and all of that is a young following that's coming through. So I think if I was in charge of the Labour group in Hartlepool at the minute, I'd be really, really worried, because all of those things which I've contained in my letter are all facts. They can all be evidenced, and these people, and as I've related in the letter, are continuing to run this carnival. It's a circus-like council that we've got there, and we've got some fantastic officers who are really trying to oppose the work that's going on. But it's very difficult if your employer is telling you, you will do this and you will do that. And there's some of the sort of disgraceful, I mean, you talk about the calamitous leadership of the council's leader. If you look at some of the frivolous spend that's been spent in the town recently, take Jackson's Lantern as an example. When that came to council, we were told there was a plan going to come forward. No plan came forward within 18 months. We then bulldozed it with a view that somebody was going to take it if it was bulldozed. Still nothing's gone forward. And the amount of money, there's about 1.65 million that's been spent on doing that. At the same time that we're making people redundant in the council, we're cutting frontline services, we're cutting support towards the third sector, we're seeing our VDA closing through lack of council support. All of these things have an impact on you and I. Yeah. And you know, you then start to look at some of the other frivolous spending. The brand new flagpoles that went up in front of the Civic Centre. Why? The flower pots that went, the giant flower pots that went outside the steps of the Civic Centre and on the War Memorial. Why? You know, collectively, we're talking about £50,000 worth of expenditure, completely wasted. And that's before I then start getting and listing many, many other things that I could do till the cows come home. You were obviously an independent councillor.
In 3 years' time, do you think, which party do you see as running the authority?
The perfect utopia for me is one thing, and it's that party politics is removed completely out of local council. I get why it exists nationally. There has to be party politics when it comes to national politics. But I think locally, and particularly when you're talking about a small town, because we are a small town, 90,000 people in Hartlepool, there is no reason why people should have political allegiances, because one of the things that really annoys me on this, and there's one councillor who will openly admit to this, it's party before the politics of the people. It's the party comes first in everything. And the protection that they have in place to make sure that the party exists rather than doing the right thing for the residents is completely abhorrent. So I would love to see a situation where it's a legal structure that would need to change, so I'm not sure how possible it is, but every councillor in that council chamber has no political allegiance, and they all do what's the right thing for the residents of this town. I'd like to think, as someone who's been independent for the last 7.5 years, that is something that I've done. Sometimes I may have voted with Labour, or sometimes I've voted with a Conservative proposal, or sometimes I've voted with a UKIP proposal, or a PHF, or an independent proposal, because I think that's the thing that I've thought is the right thing to do for the town, and the right thing to do for our residents at that particular point, not because it's politically persuaded, because it's the right thing to do. But sadly, that's not what we see demonstrated in the council chamber time after time. What we see is people who will take their direction from the leader of the Labour Party, and they will all vote accordingly. So it's one mind making the minds up of 19 other people. And what really grieves me is there's some people within the Labour Party in Hartlepool who are really good people. Yeah. Who I believe are really good people who've got involved in politics for the right reasons. They want to make a difference. But something happens at 7 o'clock on a Thursday night when they walk in that chamber. It's almost like their personality, their thoughts, their opinions, everything they've got to say just disappears into the ether. And what we get is this marionette type of action where the puppet master pulls one string and all the hands go up at the same time. And several times I've had conversations with councillors afterwards that have came over to me and said, I agreed with you on that point. And I said, why didn't you vote for it? And they said, well, we couldn't because we were told not to. And that's not what people elect their councillors to do. Now, I appreciate that turning the council into 33 independents is a big feat to do. I get that. So I think my second plan, my backup plan is that whoever is the leading political party, whether it's Labour, and it's likely to continue to be Labour for some time, they expunge that poison that's in there. And I've mentioned, that's the phrase I've used in the letter, they take that poison away from the top. They cut off the head of the snake and they allow a new rose to bloom through, a new leader to come through, somebody who really does have, good, honest values at the heart of themselves and is not afraid to do the right thing for the town, not because they think they're going to get an extra couple of thousand a year and keep themselves in the champagne lifestyle that they've become accustomed to.
And looking back over your time, what do you regard as your highest success and your worst disappointment?
I think in terms of, it depends how you define success, because actually success for me was something that I did for one particular individual. It's not well broadcast out there, but it was a particularly young man who was living on the streets and sleeping in the train station at Seaton, and a resident came to me and spoke to me about that. And being able to put something in place for that one person was probably one of the things that I'm most proud about being a councillor. It's something that certainly at the time made me fill up quite a lot, because the circumstances behind it was just a guy trying to do the right thing and things didn't work out for him. It was that roll of a dice that could happen to any of us at any particular time where your life just changes, and his changed. And being able to help him get back to where he should be was just great. It was great. The worst disappointment's quite easy for me to say, and that's Lonska Hall. The effort that myself, other ward councillors, council officers, everybody is put into trying to rid Seaton of that eyesore is unbelievable. And you know, I was really excited last August when we eventually managed to get in front of a planning inspector and put forward a case for the council in terms of, and I spoke at that meeting to the planning inspector from a residents and a ward council perspective, and really put forward a convincing case. The council put forward an amazing case of why that building should no longer be there. And sadly, for various reasons, the planning inspector sided with the owner of the building and gave them 18 months to do the plans that they said they were going to do.
Well, that's just coming up, though, isn't it?
Well, the 12 months partners period is complete. I think the 18 months is up in February 2018, and nothing's happened.
No.
Nothing's moved on with that building.
And it is an eyesore.
We said at the time, when we found out what the planning inspector's decision was, we know nothing will happen, and it's so frustrating, and it is. I really do feel it's been a big disappointment that all of that effort that's gone in, 7.5 years of effort of raising the issue about that, really trying to get things moved on, trying to work with the landowner to do something about it, and then ultimately having to go down the legal course that failed. Yeah, it's a big disappointment.
I've always been surprised, actually, from a public standpoint, that it wasn't a danger to the public, you know, because it's easy access to it.
There were certain times where it was brought in front of the planning committee and certain orders were placed, section 215 notices were placed on the building for them to do remedial work to make it safe. It's incredibly frustrating. You know, it's in the 7.5 years that I've been a ward councillor, there's 3 issues that have come up time and time again. Every ward surgery, same 3 issues. Landfills, the Lonska Centre and dog muck on the seafront. Yeah. They're the 3 issues, and if I was to put them in any particular order, I would say that by leaps and bounds it is the Lonska Hall.
Well, we'll see what happens in the future with that one.
Fingers crossed.
Now, so obviously something more closer to your heart. You're manager of the Cafe 711 and of Families First North East.
That's correct, yeah.
You said in your Facebook page that this is where your heart lies in the charity. Tell us a bit more about the charity.
Yeah, some of it was mentioned in the letter. The Hartlepool Families Fest is an organisation. It's 30 years young.
And is it North East in the title?
Sorry, Families Fest. So we've recently just expanded our name, you see, sorry. Yeah. Families Fest North East, an organisation.
And we'll put the details up for anyone who wants to support it, by the way.
Great stuff, thank you. It's 30 years young. It's a really exciting organisation and quite innovative organisation that supports families and children and young people where a child has a disability, and it can't help but just get you there. So
if a family in Hartlepool or in the North East region, is there a limit on the area?
Well, at the minute, 99% of our work goes on in Hartlepool.
Yeah.
And that's obviously led to, one of the reasons it's led to my resignation from the council, because we are now starting to work in neighbouring authorities. So, for example, Stockton, Middlesbrough, and what I'm calling the coastal corridor of the Durham coastline, yeah. So the collieries, with a view that sort of before the end of the financial year, we'll have a fairly healthy presence in those areas where we'll be offering support to families where there's children with a disability.
So if a family has a disabled child, they can come to you.
Absolutely.
And is it just financial, moral?
No, it's not financial support actually. There is equipment that we will loan to families. We have a very healthy equipment library that we loan out. There's about £80,000 worth of special needs equipment that we loan out to families on a regular basis. But that's just one element of it. Most of the support is around social support as well. So we run a series of after-school clubs, holiday provision, weekend activities, sports programs, youth clubs on an evening, one-to-one support, groups for autism. Yeah, it's a really big organisation, and from the very first day that I came here in 2007, I could probably tell you the exact date as well because I've been here exactly a week. And it just, something grasped me, you know, as somebody who formerly was a school teacher, mathematics school teacher, for a short time, and it just never really captured me. This organisation did from literally day 3. And, you know, I would go home on an evening and I'd be, you know, in some cases quite upset about some of the kids that we were working with and how much life had rolled them a terrible dice. And I'd go home, and there was one particular boy in the first week who really did sort of emote something inside. And every night I was going home and I'm saying to my wife, you know, Nick, there's this boy and he said this to me today, and then the next night it was someone else, and I'm sitting there. And she said to me at the end of the first week, she said, if you come home with any of those children, I will divorce you. You know, we haven't got the space to be looking after everyone's children. And time moves on, and we offered a lot of support to that family, and it was a real horrible, tragic circumstance behind him. But then I saw him about a year ago, and he came up to me and he said, you don't recognise me, do you? And he's grown into this big strapping lad. He's developed into quite an articulate young man as well. And when I realised who it was just there was a big smile on your face knowing that you were part of that young person's journey and being able to see what they're doing. And that he's turned into a very erudite young man who, you know, the world's his oyster now. He's 19-year-old, he's out there, he's looking for work. He still has his learning difficulties and his physical disabilities, but he's out there, and he's moved on, and all those bad things that happened to him in the past, they're gone, they're finished with. So I want to spend my time doing much more of that, spending my time on something which is much more positive in what I do. Yeah. Rather than banging my head against a brick wall and trying to you know, change people who are so ingrained in civic life that they're never going to change.
There is a bit of a contrast, isn't there?
There's a huge contrast. Yeah. But this organisation's work is you know, it's led the way for others to follow. You know, there's examples of work that we've done that's being picked up by nationally, by like the NHS and by other organisations as examples of good practice. You know, we're making a difference in Hartlepool, but we're setting the pathway for other people to walk down. Final
question, Paul. What advice are you going to give to the next Seaton councillor?
I think the main thing...
After this resignation letter, yeah. Is there any hope for them?
Well, there is. I think the one bit of advice that I would give to them is to ensure that you always respond to residents. You know, even if it's a response that you're giving them that they're not going to like, just always go back to residents. There's nothing worse. One of the reasons why I got involved in politics initially is because I'd wrote to my ward councillor at the time and he didn't respond to me. And it really wound me up. So I wrote to him again.
It is a disappointment.
And he didn't respond. So I actually went and sought him out. And
you mean sought to find him, not sought him out?
No. To look for him. And to have a conversation with him about you know, this particular issue. And he was quite blasé in his response to me, and he was all, do I really have to be discussing this with you? And I just found that, you know, it was quite frustrating and very annoying that, you know, this is supposed to be one of my representatives, and he's not having a conversation with me about it. So I think that's the one thing. Always make sure that you respond to residents, whether it's a response that they're going to like or not, and try to do it timely as well.
Paul, every success in the future, and obviously much success with your charity. Paul, every success in the future, and obviously much success with your charity. Thanks for the interview.
Thank you. Many thanks. Thank you.